Welcome to the IKIGAI International podcast. And today we're having a special guest with us. It's Anastasia Khawaja, and I'm so glad to have her as my guest. Hi, Anastasia.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Hello. So I'm sure that many know who you are, Anastasia, but can you please introduce yourself to whoever is watching us for the first time and don't know who is Anastasia?
So I'm Anastasia Khawaja. I use she, her pronouns, and I currently reside in Ramallah, Palestine. I've been in the ESL field for, I guess, going on almost 2 decades at this point. I've taught around the world, very involved in TESOL International Association. I have a whole bunch of degrees, published some papers, but really I just love being able to connect and meet new friends around the world, and especially now in this region where I have found myself since July. So yeah, thank you.
Welcome, Anastasia. And actually, what I like about you and your energy, so what I noticed on your social media is that you are a very enthusiastic person and you like and you love life, actually. And that's why I knew that you were the perfect guest for the Ikigai podcast. And let us explain a little bit what is the Ikigai for whoever is listening or hearing this word and listening to the podcast for the first time. So the Ikigai is a Japanese concept. It's a Japanese philosophy and a way of life. It's about finding someone's purpose in life for longevity, for improving life conditions, and for enjoying life at its utmost. And I've noticed this, Anastasia, in your personality, in be it professional, personal. So I'm glad to have you today as my guest. And I'm interested to know, Anastasia, what made you interested first in the teaching profession in this field?
I was actually thinking about that because when I got my bachelor's degree, I got it in general music and Spanish because I was good at languages, still good at languages. And I didn't really know what was going to be next. And I started looking at the humanities aspect because I was fascinated by um, aspects of what was happening in music years ago, was happening in poetry, which was also happening in art. Like everything was kind of flowing together. But the humanities master's program it wasn't really the route I guess I was supposed to take. And I was working as a secretary at a community college. And I was just, volunteering at my church and everything. And I somehow found myself volunteering with kids. And I really enjoyed it. And one of my friends, who was also volunteering with me was like, have you ever thought about teaching? And you know how something happens where someone just kind of speaks into your life and you just like you feel it's coming not just from that person, but from kind of like a higher power. That was kind of how I felt. I'm like, oh, teaching. And it just kind of started from there. I started looking into ESOL because I spoke Spanish, and then that moved me into my very first job at a school. It was a private school because I didn't have an education degree. And then from there, I wanted to get my professional certification, which meant more classes. And then I found multilingual, multicultural education through an ESOL elective class, which I found I really had a passion for. And I said, that is what I'm going to do my master's degree in. Then I started my master's degree. Then I started teaching adults, which interestingly enough is actually how I met my husband. And then I found different jobs around the world. And, I've kind of been going at it ever since. I started my PhD in it because I wanted to do more research. I wanted to really give back. I wanted people to train teachers to do what I do. And also just, explore more aspects of not just English, but identity and culture and language and how everything just kind of goes together. So I really looked more at applied linguistics, which is really mainly what I do now, in addition to, of course, teaching. And I've done more like English for specific purposes, intercultural communication, diversity, equity, and inclusion. A lot of different things kind of move into this teaching thing. And all because years ago, someone told me, have you ever thought about teaching? So that's it just kind of went from there, I guess.
And to ask you like an even more specific question, because what you said is amazing. So when it comes to teaching, what do you think are the essential characteristics that a teacher should have? Like apart from the academic part, do you think that at the level of competence, at the level of soft skills, at the level, so how do you see this?
I mean, the first thing you have to be able to do is be flexible, and you have to be open, and you have to be someone who knows that they don't have all the answers. The teacher-fronted way is not really, and I know a lot of cultures go more teacher-fronted, and I completely respect that. But when it comes to how we think, we are not linear hierarchical thinkers. Yet the tenets of how we are taught to teach. Got it. Okay. Yes. So, we're not hierarchical, we're not linear thinkers. So when you teach and when you approach a classroom, really at any age, there has to be openness, and there has to be a place where students can feel safe. That has never been more true than, especially during the pandemic, we realized such an important role that teachers have had. I think that the connection that we build with our students, when you can sense something in the room, it was very hard to try to sense online. So you had to find other ways to connect and to work. And so that flexibility, the innovation, trying to build connections both online and face to face have been really, really important. I've had students tell me so many things just because they feel safe. And so if they feel safe, I feel like I've done most of my job, because in order for them to be able to do the different types of academic tests that we ask them to do, they have to have their basic needs met, right?
Yes.
So it's one of the
Mm,
most important things, I think, before you even open a book. You
it
have
is.
to be able to have that connection.
It is. They should maslow before they bloom. So that's what I think.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
I want to ask you a question, because I've seen that your personality is amazing. I'd like to know more about the most creative project that you have worked with your students, or a project that your students delivered to you. So both ways. Any one of
Oh
them,
man,
let's say.
let me think.
Yeah.
You know, so my dad was he was a businessman, but he also, first and foremost, he was an artist. And so anytime in my high school projects, middle school projects, I had a chance to do any kind of artistic thing, I would jump on it, and my dad would help me, right? I remember my gosh, we did something called was it ninth grade? It was ninth grade world history. We had to do these different projects, and it was a projects for certain units. So one unit, we literally paper mache a Roman Colosseum. Another unit, it was the Renaissance, and my dad and I, we paper mache an egg, and it had like art popping out of it because it was a rebirth, right? So I've always loved that creativity. And every time I brought these projects and people loved it, professors, teachers loved it. So I've always been able to try to, bring, whatever strengths that my students have. I just try to bring that in. As far as creativity, I've always tried to bring, I've worked in ESL for many years, and most of it has been in the United States until I moved here. And so I've always tried to, especially during when there's a mainstream class and I have international students in it, like a bridge class where you have domestic students, you have international students, you always want to try to find ways to bring all of the different cultures together. And so I would always give them choices. Like when I did my humanities course, which I loved teaching, I would say you can either expand upon any topic that you want, or you can find something that we've talked about in US humanities and bring your cultural element to it. I have had such amazing projects based on this. I had one of my students look at the Statue of Liberty construction, which we talked about, and she's Brazilian. So she talked about Christ the Redeemer statue and like that whole thing. I had students, one of my German students talk about the Harlem Renaissance and how, African Americans had, really, it was important for them to show this artistic and, side of them that, white people wouldn't essentially fear. And she said that was how Germans felt after World War II, to remember that we're not all Nazis. And these all came from them. These connections were just amazing. And, my domestic students learned and everything, but it was just a way for everyone to kind of be able to share. Anytime that students can bring their own cultural connections and kind of build new spaces is just a really exciting time. I remember when I taught a poetry class and I told them to make found poems, which would be just, finding words from magazines and creating and, constructing. And one of my students, I think he wasn't from Palestine. He was from another Arab country. He wrote a poem about Palestine and just made me cry. I forget exactly what the content was, but it was just so powerful and so moving. Anytime students can find ways to bring themselves or to bring in another aspect of creativity is a way that they can build connection, because they're doing it in English too, building connection to the language, but also infusing their culture within the language as well. And again, like creating a new space that maybe had not been open previously. But yeah, I think that might answer your question. I kind of went a little bit on the.
It is actually, it answers fully and even more than I was expecting. And maybe like I was about to ask you another question, which is the cultural aspect, but you've answered this all in one. And I believe that we can't teach English outside of the context, because we're teaching human beings after all, and we can help them even embrace that difference and talk about it in a safe environment. And when it comes to building their personalities, for example, when it comes to young learners, teenage learners and adult learners, it's good that they feel safe so that they can speak up and they can express themselves and learn the language meanwhile, because the language is not dissociated from the context. And perfect, that was amazing, Anastasia. And as for your passion for teaching, let's say, let us now dive deeper into it. So when did you know at that particular moment that you wanted to pursue further research in English studies, and you said, no, it's not enough just to be a teacher, I'm just going to fulfill more research so that I can share my experience and establish kind of further search, let's say, how can I explain this? So maybe it's beyond just the certificate, beyond just the degree. So you knew that's your purpose of life. So that's something like when you wake up in the morning, this is what I want to do.
Yeah, no, I mean, for a long time now, sometimes like, I'll wake up and be like, I get to go teach. I get to do research. I get to help students develop their, like, I get to do this as a job. I get paid to do this. That's just a very exciting thing. And I was able to revitalize that when I was able to, move out of the country, but we can talk about that. We can revisit that in a little bit. But one of the ways I knew I absolutely wanted to not just be a teacher, but also to train and to help was when I was actually in the ESOL class, which I referred to get my professional certification to teach, because I wanted to try to teach outside the private school. I was like, let me see what I can do. I had a really challenging first year as a teacher. They hired me as a Spanish teacher, but that was only part-time, but they really wanted me full-time. So they said, you know what, you can go teach second grade. I'm like, I don't have an education degree. I don't know how to teach kids. It's like, it's okay. Here's the curriculum. You'll do fine or whatever. And, my mentor teacher, her son was in my class. And on top of that, that was her class. She was the second grade teacher, but because the school did not want her to teach her own son, they moved her to first grade. So not only was she upset that she had to move from the second grade class and she could not teach her son, here is this very novice, first year, barely out of college girl essentially coming in to teach the class. Now, while there were some, somewhat trying times, I ended up earning her respect by the end. I worked so hard and we ended up actually developing a really nice relationship, which I was very, very grateful for. And she was grateful that I stepped up to the challenge and I worked with her son and everything. But I, so when I was sitting, so I had somebody who actually tested borderline autism. I had another student whose English was not so great, but of course I didn't know enough to identify him as an ESOL student. There were a lot of students who really needed help. It was a private school. It didn't have the resources. It was me. And I had to try to make things work with several different types of students. When I was in this ESOL class, which of course they said, you should take the ESOL class because you know Spanish and we need ESOL teachers. I'm like, what is ESOL? I had no idea what ESOL was. English is basically teaching English speakers of other languages. And I'm sitting in this class and this professor was teaching us about how to adapt materials for ESOL students. And we were sitting and we were looking at this word problem for math. It was like a 5th or 6th grade level. And he just matter of factly says, how can you make this word problem workable for students who may not understand English? And there were people, they were undergraduates. I was the only one of the few that had a degree and was already actively teaching. And they were sitting here like, well, it's a word problem. I mean, they have to be able to do a word problem. I mean, how else can you, they couldn't understand, they couldn't get it. And so I'm sitting and I'm listening to them. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, but they don't. They can't do it. This is his point. So if they can't do it, this is your job. How do you do your job to make sure that your students can learn? I looked at me and the professor looked at me and was like, so we're going to take a break now. And we're going to come back to this. And that was the point where I said, hey, is there a master's degree in this? Because I want to do this. Because I realized that teachers don't know how to teach everybody. There was a growing number of ESOL students in the state of Florida at the time, and it was continuing. So how could I be that teacher to be in the classrooms, but also how could I also help to train the teachers in order to do this? And that was right there. And they said, oh, well, actually, yes, there is a program. And that was when I knew. And I started the process. I think I was in the class in May. I started the program in that fall. I started the program in August. I started the master's program. Well, I still concurrently taught at my school. And yeah, and then during the course of my PhD, I looked at, during the course of my master's degree program, I took another class, which was a linguistics research class. I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the different ways in which we can teach a language, not just English, but other languages. And I was fascinated by multilingualism and how languages can be stored or absorbed in the brain and, how it can come out input, output. I was fascinated by all of it. And I wanted to do more. And I'm like, well, how can I learn more about this? Oh, you do a PhD. Oh, okay. So, then at that point, I knew I wanted to do a PhD at some point. After I traveled a little bit, I taught a little bit. I was in Dubai for a while. But then I knew I wanted to do more research. I wanted to look more into this because even when you look at psycholinguistics, sociolinguistics, there are always different ways. There are always different innovations these days. And so I wanted to be part of that. And so that is how, that's how I just knew as I started to, teach more, go to more countries, I knew I wanted more. I knew I wanted more. I still want more, but I'm done with school. I'm done being a student. But I want to contribute more and I want to also learn more from different people. So I think as an educator, I think as a true educator, we always know that we're lifelong learners. And the more that we learn, the more we want to get back.
Sure.
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. It's first, let me talk about the first part is that sometimes we can get a degree, they teach us what is academic, but sometimes it's not obvious that you apply this to teaching methodology. So, and there are degrees and there are certificates for that so that we can apply and we can blend the two so that we can make sure our learners get the best learning experience ever. And as for multilingualism, I absolutely agree with you. And in most of the cases, in most of my workshops, I always start by talking about how I learned another language apart from English. And it's amazing how you see this from a different perspective. And being a lifelong learner, I guess, is part of growth mindset. And the more we learn, the less we know. That's what I think is like, I discover a lot of times that I see, look, this is new, and I'm never afraid of being I've never been afraid of being exposed to new content, because I think that we're not unteachable. So we should dare even to be to unlearn things. So so in order to learn them the right way or a new way, because things are evolving. For example, what is happening nowadays with AI, everyone, they've been scared of AI, and they said maybe it will replace teachers in the classroom, or teachers will be losing their profession. But no, it's like kind of, we are assisted through AI. So a good teacher knows how to employ that to empower his students, his or her students. So employ them, and let's say, and use that for the most beneficial outcome for the lesson and for the class, and because this will be the future, so we shouldn't be afraid of that. Now,
aren't human. You cannot beat a human connection. They might try to supplement, but there's no, I've not ever really been afraid that we're about to completely replace teachers, because I mean, they can be assistants, and maybe there might be less teacher assistant jobs because they're going to try to bring in robots. But as far as like that core person to make sure that the classroom is running the way it needs to, a robot can't do that.
Yeah, and even when it comes to AI and augmented reality, so both of them, they need human intervention. They need humans to complete. For example, the chat bots. It's like there's a human being type in the sentence or whatever, so that AI will process this. It's not like 100%. So we control that. But it's like just like in movies, it's like it's the impression as if AI is going to take over the world. But I guess not for the moment. Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah, but now your next question for you, Anastasia, is apart from teaching, where do you see yourself, like when it comes to your identity as a person, and maybe your hobbies, anything that makes you feel well at ease, makes you feel happy, makes you feel like comfortable doing what you want in life?
I mean, I love to travel. I love traveling in different countries, and I love being able to have the opportunity to present and teach in other countries. But really, like, I love to be able to just enjoy other cultures, be exposed to other languages. I love yoga, and I love Pilates. I used to run. I was a runner in the States, actually, and I ran a couple of marathons. And at the time I really needed it. Running was like a release for me. But here, I really can't run here. I don't feel as safe to run here, because I'm afraid that if I'm running, people might think I'm running from something, or, I don't trust that I am safe enough to be able to run on my own without maybe not feeling as secure. So, I found that running had a purpose for me in the States, and it didn't serve the same purpose here. So, I'm very happy with my Pilates and my yoga and, some weightlifting here and there. So it's not as much, but I love to get together with friends. I love to be able to really kind of relax. I think that in the States, I worked a lot, and during the pandemic, I didn't really have office hours because I wasn't in an official, like in a physical, like office. So when we teach international students, they're literally all over the world. Sometimes they're meeting you, or they're trying to say, hey, are you available? It's like midnight. Oh yeah, well, since I don't have to go to work and I just have to roll out of bed and teach, there was really no boundary, right? So it took some time to reestablish those boundaries, but then also moving on the other side of the world, where you're forced to slow down in a lot of ways because it's not as fast paced as the States. I think it made me be able to just kind of appreciate things more, be more involved with what my kids are doing in school. The teachers are not as, they're good here, but they're not as like thorough here. The educational opportunities are not as much as they are in the States. And so sometimes that has to be supplemented by me. And also just being able to find, things for my kids to do. It takes hunting, like it takes time to be able to try to do that. In the States, it was always like, oh yeah, you got this club, you got that club, you have that recreational thing. It was really easy to find things, like here, like my oldest son is a swimmer. Not a lot of swimming opportunities here. And so we've had to try to find like the recreation center. There's actually a YMCA here. So being able to, just like have that, get the kids to have, my youngest son's going to play right now, getting the kids to have their connections in addition to, like just being able to try to find a sense of belonging, I think, has made me feel really happy. And it has nothing to do with my teaching or my, writing or anything like that. I'm also finding more time to write. I was trying to write this paper that I had started years ago when I was in grad school in my women and gender studies classes, and it had something to do with my autoethnography and my experience in Palestine. I can finally start writing about that because I live here. So different things that I can kind of really think deeply about what certain cultural aspects mean to me, how I feel about that, things I'm going to adapt, things I'm not going to adopt, things I'm going to kind of literally infuse into my life and things I won't. There's a lot about the culture that I do infuse into my life, like even language wise, there are certain words I don't even say in English anymore. It's just in Arabic now.
That was my question, actually.
Yeah.
Before
It's
we
like
wrap up. Yeah.
I don't even say them in English anymore. It
Yeah.
doesn't seem as fulfilling to just say the English. And there are certain things that are not even translated or not even translatable from English to Arabic and, things like that. So yeah, just, different things that, just again, it's not very specific, but I don't really have a lot of specific things living here. Things pop up, you deal. There are strikes, you deal. There's, travel challenges, you deal. And, you just, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Anastasia. Actually, that was my last question before we wrap up. It's like, yeah, you've mentioned Arabic, so I was about to ask you a question, but please feel free. If you don't want to answer the question, just say no. And I was about to ask you about any nice words you learn in the Arabic language, so something that you use it maybe, or a word that you said, this is a nice word, and I can use it on a daily basis or whatever. So
yeah, no, that's a really good question. There's a lot of things that do not translate directly. And I've stopped trying to find direct translations because certain things just, cannot be translated. Even like I think English too, but most things in certain languages grasp concepts and emotions and feelings much better. There's one that, and anybody who is listening, if you know the actual English translation, let me know, because anyone who I talk to, they don't have an exact translation. But there's one thing that we say all the time when we see somebody after they've worked in their house or after they've, taught a class or kitchen, we always say yatik afia. And then the response is la afik or ala afiki, right? A lot of things in Arabic is kind of like call and response. I mean, like I have a humanities background. I love jazz music. So I appreciate the whole call and response. Salam alaikum, alaikum salam, salam, ala salamek or alam salamek if you're, male or female.
nice.
Arabic is very gendered. So I've kind of learned, things like that. Like, even for me, like I don't say things like feel better. I always say salamtek because I feel like it's wishing. Salam is peace in Arabic, right? So you're always wishing peace and health and well-being on the person. And Arabic seems to get that across much better than English ever has. So that's just part of my, vocabulary now. Also, I bond a lot with my mother-in-law by cooking. So I was learning, she was teaching me dishes to cook for her son because, I'm pescatarian. I don't eat a lot of meat. So I had to learn like how to cook. So a lot of the spices and vegetables and fruits I know in Arabic, mostly. I don't even use the English words anymore. Even when we moved back to the States from Dubai, we used a lot of the Arabic words. And so of course, now living here, we all use the Arabic words for most everything in the kitchen because that is, just... we use it a lot more often. So yeah,
That's perfect. You know, يعطيك العافية in our dialect, in the Tunisian dialect, we say يعطيك الصحة, which means health.
Ah,
يعطيك العافية,
oh
يعطيك
yeah.
الصحة. Yeah, it's the same.
Yeah.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
there is a
Like
salamtek.
that when you're eating too, say saha or sahtin,
صحة.
two health.
صحتين. Yeah.
And I'm
You
like,
see me
"Sahtin, that's two,
commenting.
right? It's literally two healths."
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like you're constantly wishing somebody well. And then you say something back. It's like this constant, thing. It's like, yeah.
Actually, and once I noticed this, and I wanted to once I saw you posting something about food, and I wanted to say like صحة صحتين, because like it seems to be very yummy, and I knew that you were speaking Arabic. So and thanks for being for keeping this flexible mindset, and for learning from everyone equally. And I learned from you, actually, your energy, whatever you share online, is very inspirational to everyone. And look, whoever visits your profile, okay, comes across your posts, like cannot but be inspired by you, Anastasia. And now we haven't still worked a lot together. Like, we're now working together in Tefel, Kuwait, and we're volunteering, both of us, for this. And I guess we'll be having plenty of things to share and to learn from each other. And thank you very much for being my guest today. Would you like to add anything before we wrap up?
Yeah, no, I just want to say thank you for the work that you do. I think we met through one of the many
Avance,
presentations we both do.
Avery in Oman.
I it was IELTA or something. It was one of the IELTA presentations. But you're always constantly active. You always have different opportunities for different people. So it's a lot of work. I always see that you're so active. So thank you for the work that you do and the connections that you bring. And I hope we can meet in person
I
at
wish.
some point.
I'm inviting
Now
you
that
to
we're in the
Tunisia,
same
to my
region,
country. Yes.
we're in the same region now, so now we have to. Anyway,
Yes.
so thank you for everything you do. And thank you for bringing us together so we can have this beautiful connection for this time.
Thank you. Thank you, Anastasia. And thank you for sharing your ikigai, which means like your purpose in life. Ikigai is a word, and it's beyond the word. So what we're discussing in the podcast, we're not just sticking to a word which can be defined through a dictionary or word through a book. So it's like a kind of a way of life, a lifestyle that most of us, we embrace as people and as professionals. And I was interested most of all in knowing my colleagues' ikigai, because we share the same profession, but not necessarily the same interest. But we guess what attracts both of us. Your vibe attracts a tribe. So that is what makes us come along together. Together is that we share certain things that makes us keep this growth mindset, all of us. And I hope to see you soon in person, and more of a virtual events, and most specifically, inshallah. So let's see if we're going to meet in face to face. Anastasia, thank you very much for your time and for sharing. I know that the podcast is a little bit short, because I just want to make this very fun and easy to use, so that people can listen to it on the go. But I'm sure we'll be having other podcasts in the future. Thank you very much, Anastasia.
شكرا يسرا.
شكرا.
يعطيك العافية.
عايشك الله يعافيكي. شكرا. Thanks.